Salam alaikum, shalom alechem. Peace with you all. Thank you all for joining us here today. My name is Chris Miller. I'm with Abrahamic Reunion. And I know many of you here, but in case there's anyone who I don't know, introduce myself just briefly. I'll be helping with the tech Zoom side and helping to hold the container for this beautiful program. So Abrahamic Reunion is a people-to-people organization working to replace violence, hatred, and fear with peace, understanding, and trust in Israel and Palestine and around the world. It's founded in 2005 by religious and spiritual leaders from the major faith groups in the Holy Land, with the support of people around the world. We've conducted hundreds of intercultural and interfaith events, which have directly touched the lives of tens of thousands of Israelis and Palestinians. We have trained hundreds of peace builders, empowering women, young adults, and clergy. And each meeting with the other, like tonight with the other, can act like a micro-vaccination against hatred, misunderstanding, and fear, equipping us to challenge generalizations with direct experience and dispel the disease of uh, oh, I'm just going to mute you there, Ted, for a moment. Dispel any diseases of othering by getting people to know each other directly, mingling communities. So this event tonight is part of that. We have 3 different communities coming together. Rising Tide International. Abid is the intercultural, interreligious dialogue lecturer and expert at Rising Tide, and he's worked with Abrahamic Reunion as well many years in the past and in the future. Ted Brownstein, who just had to go take a quick call, he's part of LWIN, Lake Worth Interfaith Network, and I know David Hall is maybe part of that as well on occasion, and many others here. So this is the first of what we hope to be many interfaith, interreligious dialogues and programs exploring the texts, scriptural text study of common stories, common themes, to really deeply understand the different faiths and traditions and each other and ourselves better. To know the other, to know ourselves, we must know the other as well, is one of our common phrases. So yeah, really looking forward to that. And of course, Ted and Abid are our featured guests, and they'll be, I'm sure, mainstays in this series, just coming back each time. But we'll also have other featured guest clergy and lecturers as in future events. So we're planning to have Abid speak and then Ted speak, and then we'll have Q&A at the end. Q&A and dialogue amongst all of us is the format for tonight. It's the first one of these we're doing, so the format might evolve as we go, but we're looking forward to this time together. And Abid and Ted, any words of just brief introduction before we begin?
Dear Ted, please.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's wonderful to see all your faces. We're still fitting on one screen, but it won't be long. No, we're on 2 screens already. So welcome to everybody. Nice, diverse group. I'm Ted Brownstein. I've been involved in interfaith work for over 20 years. My academic training is in the Hebrew Bible from a secular perspective, not a seminary or theological perspective. So a lot of archaeology, research into the meaning of the text from historical and archaeological point of view often. I identify as a Jewish Christian Baha'i, and I pretty much practice all 3 in various degrees, as well as, a little bit of Islam here and there. I do Salat when I go to the mosque, and we do indigenous fire ceremonies here and so forth. So really get something from all of those traditions, and we hope to share just a touch of those flavors with you this evening. So it's wonderful to be here and share with my dear friend and colleague Abid, as well as Chris Miller. welcome everybody.
Salam, shalom, and welcome everybody. Actually, it's my pleasure to be with you today. And after this beautiful introduction from dear Akbar, Chris, and Ted, so I think I prepared. So my name is Sheikh Salam Manasra. First of all, I'm from the Holy Land originally and living now in Sarasota, Florida, working with Rising Tide and Abrahamic Reunion to create peace and love and spread peace and understanding between the people. So I prepared the script. I would like to read from it and to deliver the information in a professional way more and to be more focused. And please be patient with me, especially with my language. I don't have the best language, English language, so I would like to, if you would be patient, that would be great. And thank you again. So, yeah, just a minute. So first, I want to sincerely thank you again, all of for joining us for this enriching and meaningful and beautiful gathering. We are here today to learn together and reflect together. It is not necessary for us to agree on every word, nor either to disagree on every detail. But it's absolutely necessary is that we respect one another, cooperate in righteousness and good consciousness, and strive to spread peace and love. In light of the Hajj season in Islam, the pilgrimage now, followed by the occasion of Eid Al Adha, the sacrifice celebration, we thought it important to hold this scholarly and spiritual gathering to explore the true meaning behind the sacrifice as it appears in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. To begin, I would like to briefly just clarify. In Islam, we have two main celebrations. The first, Eid al-Fitr, which comes after a whole month of fasting, Ramadan, a time of gratitude, joy, and spiritual renewal. The second occasion, the Eid al-Adha, which follows the pilgrimage to Mecca, where Muslims perform rituals that reenact event from the life of our father Abraham and his son Ishmael, peace be upon them. Our topic today is one of the core themes that unite the Abrahamic religions. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all emerge from the same source, from the light of Prophet Abraham, who is regarded as the spiritual father of all three traditions. He is the connecting link, the truth, and the origin from which so many prophets came. That is why Abraham holds such a universal reverence across faiths. It is only natural that our interpretation may differ and that the details of the story may vary across traditions. But we are here today not to get lost in those details, rather to focus on the shared spiritual lesson. One of the challenges we face, especially in the East and among followers of the three faiths, is that when religious dialogue become too focused on our debating details, it sometimes loses its purpose. Yes, comparative discussions are valuable, but they must remain within the realm of respectful learning, never turning into rivalry. The deeper purpose and the divine message behind the story must remain our focus. The spiritual wisdom drawn from the life of Abraham is far greater than any disagreement over names or details. Each of us may hold different beliefs. Everyone is free to follow their own understanding. But the core message, what Allah wants from us, is that we be united in His worship, obedient to His guidance, and spiritually close to Him. This is clearly expressed in the Quran when Allah says, "O people of book," people of book means the Jewish and the Christians. "O people of book, come to a common word between us and you, that we worship none but Allah." It's Surah Al-Imran, the Surah 3rd in the Quran. This is one of the highest goal of a human being can seek, to draw nearer to the divine and to live a life of righteousness and awarenesses. Regarding the story of the sacrifice, we are aware that there is a major differences between Islam and Judaism concerning the identity of the sacrificed son. Muslims believe it was Ishmael, while Jewish believe it was Isaac. Each tradition presents its own reasoning and scriptural foundation. But again, what matters most is not which son was be sacrificed. What matters is the lesson, the submission, the spiritual surrender, and the profound human and divine relationship embodied in the story. In the Quran, Allah deliberately does not name the son. The linguistic stretch and narrative hints suggest it is Ishmael, but the name is not explicitly stated. Many scholars understand this omission as an intentional part of the Quranic style, where many stories are told without naming specific characters. The wisdom here is powerful. The person is not the point, the message is. Because if we fixate on name and identities, we can spend years debating and gain nothing, while missing the true spiritual insight that Allah wants us to learn from the experience of Abraham. I would like to recall what my father, may Allah bless him, used to, whenever he was asked who was the son be sacrificed, Ishmael or Isaac, he would pray with the wisdom and grace. He says, if it was Ishmael, then he's my father. And if it was Isaac, then he's my uncle. What matters most is that they all succeeded in the test, but have we? And this is the real question. Because in the end, the story is not about the child. It is about our relationship with Allah, our readiness to submit to His will, our capacity to surrender what we love most in devotion to Him. Prophet Abraham, peace be upon him, was not just one among many prophets. He was turning point in human history. He is the spiritual patriarch of the three great monastic faiths. He was chosen, as the Quran tells us, to be Khalil Allah or Khalil al-Rahman. It means the beloved friend of Allah. From his lineage came many prophets. From his story came many lessons. And from his submission came the example we all strive to follow. Now I'll share with you the story of our father Abraham as it appears in the Quran and in the Islamic prophet traditions, Al-Sunnah, what the prophet says, focusing on one event in particular, the sacrifice, and the profound lessons we can learn from it. This story may sound sometimes heavy to ears, but its wisdom so vast, and its impact greater than we can measure. Before we can truly understand the story of the sacrifice, we must first understand the events before and after for a bit. Because sacrifice in Ishmael is not merely the act slaughtering an animal. It is the act of letting go, of trusting, of walking with God even when it's hardest. Today, I will present the story from the Islamic point of view, and afterward, I will joyfully turn the floor over to my brother Ted, and he will share the perspective on Judaism and Christianity. To begin, I would like to highlight that a concept of sacrifice in Islam did not start it with the famous moment of the attempted sacrifice. It began earlier with the birth of Ishmael. It is important to remember that Abraham, peace be upon him, was tested with great trials throughout his life, from his youth to his old age. Among the most significant was that he had his first son at the age of 86. His second son was as age 100. Despite being elderly, Ibrahim was tested with every stage of his life in ways that matched his closeness to Allah. When he was finally placed with a child after decades of waiting, and actually any one of us who waited for his son, he can imagine for 86 years what that means. His emotions naturally grew more attached to this beloved son. That is when Allah commanded him to take his wife and the newborn son from the Holy Land to the Arabian Peninsula, Arabian Saudi today. And Ibrahim journeyed with them for long months, maybe more. It's actually 750 miles, walking across barren lands until they reached what is now Mecca, which at that time was nothing but a dry, desolate valley. When they arrived, Abraham left his wife and son with only a small pouch of water and dates, and without further explanation, turned and began to leave. At this moment, I would like to ask each of you, not just to hear the words of the story, but to feel it. Let us imagine the journey to existation, the inner struggle. Let us picture Abraham emotions, walking with his wife and baby across burning lands, seeing his son move, nurse, cry, laugh, and play. Let us feel Hajar's confusion and worry. Did she know where she going? Did she know why? Clearly, she did not have enough information. We know this because once they arrived and Abraham turned his back and began to leave, she ran after him, calling, "Will you leave us here? Oh, Abraham, will you truly leave us here in mid of nowhere?" But he didn't answer. Then she asked him directly, "Has Allah commanded you to do this?" And he said yes, or actually in some narrations, simply nodded in his head. In that moment, she stopped, and with unwavering faith, she said the words that have become immortal in Islamic traditions: "Then Allah will not abandon us." Abraham continued his way. He did not look back, not out of cruelty, but because he was prophet following the divine command. And the weight of this test was so heavy that looking back may have shattered his resolve. He walked until he could no longer be seen. And actually, we all can imagine as a human being also, what was his feeling when he left them. And we can also imagine he give her his bag. We can see his face. So just imagine what the feelings were at the moment. Then he stopped, turned after he walked until he couldn't no longer be seen. Then he stopped and turned his gaze upward and raised his hands in the heartfelt prayers, which is recorded in the Quran. I will read that from the Quran, and actually we have a specific way to read the Quran. It's we don't use it in our language when we talk to each other, but it's especially for the Quran. And this is how the Prophet Muhammad accepted from Allah, and this is how we should read it. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربنا إني أسكنت من ذريتي بواد غير ذي زرع عند بيتك المحرم ربنا ليقيموا الصلاة فاجعل أفئدة من الناس تهوي إليهم وارزقهم من الثمرات لعلهم يشكرون. My Lord, I have settled some of my descendants' offspring in a barren valley near your sacred house, our Lord, so that they may establish prayer. So make hearts among the people incline toward them and provide for them from the fruits that they may be grateful. Later that day, Hajar and her son remained alone in the barren place. Some scholars say it was sunset. So not only was there fear and pain, but also darkness. Imagine Hajar, a mother, alone at night, protecting her infant from harm, with only a small ration of water and dates. How long that supply lasted, we do not know. In the prophetic traditions, the hadith, the sunnah, when the prophet do his comments on the Quran and say the stories, he said, the mother of Ishmael nursed him and drank from her water. But when it ran out, she and her child grew thirsty. She could not bear to watch him in pain. So she left him and climbed the hill of Safa, searching for help, then Marwa, back and forth 7 times. By the way, the Safa and Marwa, 2 small rocky mountains in Mecca, until she heard a voice. And also the 7 times, it's one thing we must do in to walk 7 times between Safa and Marwa during the pilgrimage, the Hajj, until she heard a voice near the child. She said, "Shush, be silent," to herself, and she listened again. And then she cried out, "If you can help, then help." And she saw an angel by her son. The angel struck the ground with his heel or with his wing, and water gushed forth. She began to contain it and to drink from it. The spring continued to flow even as she collected from it. This was the beginning of the Zamzam spring, a sacred source of water, still founded in Mecca today. Muslims drink from Zamzam with reverence, as it connects them to their forefather Abraham and Ishmael and Hajar. Abraham, guided by revelation, knew exactly where to place them. He knew this valley would one day become the site of Kaaba, the sacred house of Allah. In Islam, Al-Kaaba the Kaaba is believed to mirror celestial Kaaba in the heavens, around which angels constantly circle. As the Prophet said, every day 80,000 angels enter the heavenly Kaaba and never return back to do another circle. This shows us the magnitude of the angelic realm and the holiness of location. Abraham knew that this sacred place was destined to be the center of spiritual connection for humanity. That's why in his prayer he asked not only that people come to them, but that you make hearts among the people inclined toward them. This was not just a request for visitors or travelers, but for hearts to love them, to be drawn to them deeply, to feel a bond with them. And this too came to pass. A tribe from Yemen, Arab Jurhum, called Jurhum, was passing by the valley. The Arabs at that moment was traveling to find a source of waters and to live there. So they passed from there. They noticed, and it's actually was a little bit far. They noticed the birds in the skies, and actually they also in different narrations their camels was making sounds that there is a source of water nearby, and they follow the signs. There they found Hajar and Ismail, and respectfully asked permission to stay. She agreed, and on one condition, that the water belonged originally to Ismail. And so they settled there, and over time Ismail grew among them and a community was born. Meanwhile, Abraham heart remained deeply attached to his son. Though separated by distance, he longed for him, prayed for him, and would visit him at times. But we're not sure. But Allah had yet another lesson for Abraham, because he was so related to his son. He was asking about him, he know nothing about him, he want to see him. So a test, not of distance, but of sacrifice. When Allah had taken Ismail away and placed him in that far-off land, Abraham may not have understood. He just followed the command, but not fully understood. But he obeyed. Now Allah would ask something even greater. And when Abraham was overcome with sorrow and longing for his son, Allah intended to teach him yet another lesson, a lesson in total devotion. Abraham had already dedicated his entire life to Allah. As a prophet and a messenger, he had surrounded everything. Now his heart was to be tested once more. Would his deepest attachment remain to Allah alone? So Allah showed him a vision, a dream, in which he was sacrificing his son. In Islam, we believe that the dreams of prophets are true revelations from Allah. Though Allah usually conveyed revelation through the angel Gabriel, this time he chose a dream, perhaps to test whether Abraham would trust it, obey it, or doubt it. This was no small test. Abraham believed the vision and set out on a journey. It's a vision because it's harder test actually, because when you see a direct messenger from Allah tell you, angel to tell you to do something, so that's 100%. But if you see the vision, that will be so hard to you, you want to doubt it, or you would just want to obey. So he believed in it, and he set out on a journey to Mecca. By that time, Mecca had become a small settlement with people living around its spring, Zamzam. His son Ismail had grown up. According to narration, Abraham, when he arrived, he took his son without informing Hajar, just as he had once left them behind with only water and trust in the divine. So now let us read the verse of the Quran that recounts the story. And I just will translate it now directly. And he said, indeed, I will go to my Lord. He will guide me. My Lord, grant me a child from among the righteous. So we give him good tidings of a forbearing boy. And when he reached with him the age, I mean Ismail, when he reached the age of striving, he said, "O my son, indeed I have seen in my dream that I must sacrifice you. So tell me, what do you think?" He said, "O my father, do as you are commanded. You will find me in Allah's wills among the steadfast." Then, when they had both submitted, and he put him down upon his forehead, we called to him, "O Abraham, you have fulfilled the vision. Indeed, we those reward the doers of good. Indeed, this was the clear trail, and we ransomed him with a great sacrifice, and we left for him a favorable mention among later generations. Peace to be upon Abraham. Indeed, we those reward doers of good. Indeed, he was of our believing servants, and we give him good tidings of Isaac, a prophet from among the righteous." The Quran tells us that Ismail had reached the age of strength and was able to reason and make choices. Abraham asked him what he thought, not out of hesitation, but to teach us a method of communication with our children. He wanted, this is one of the lessons, he wanted to hear his son heart, Ismail, raised by his mother. And we can here just take a moment to see the relationship between the father and son, who barely see him, maybe saw him once or twice, or maybe he never saw him. He just came from far away and tell him, "I want to sacrifice you." So that was a great test, and also test for his son as well, because he want to see him. So this is why he asked him also. He want to see what his beliefs and his faith. He raised by his mother on principles of pure faith. Replied with unwavering submission, "O my father, do as you are commanded." And so when both submitted to the will of Allah, and Abraham laid his son down, he turned his face to the ground because he can't see. And also the son, what he will think when he will see his father just slow him with just following the Allah command only, and with no mercy. So he just turned him and took the knife and was prepared to sacrifice. But at that very moment, a voice called out of him, "Oh, Abraham, wait." He turned and saw an angel bringing him a ram from paradise, a heavenly substitute. Thus, the sacrifice was accepted, not through blood, but through obedience. The essence of the act was the surrender itself, the willingness to give up one's greatest love for the sake of the beloved. As a reward for this unwavering faith, Allah granted Abraham more gifts: the birth of another blessed son, Ishaq, and the honor of leadership. And Allah says in the Quran, and when Abraham was tested by his Lord with certain words, and he fulfilled them. He said, I will make you a leader for mankind. And this was mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah, the first surah in the Quran. Later, he would return again to Mecca, where he and Ishmael rebuilt the Kaaba, and Allah commanded him to call people to pilgrimage. Today, hundreds of millions respond to that call, fulfilling the legacy of a man who lived only for Allah, for our God. Now, having recalled this sacred story, I would like to reflect on a few core lessons from the Sufi perspectives. Of course, Ibn Arabi, one of the most famous scholars and also poeters in the 13th century, and the most famous Sufis, he says in his famous book, Al-Futuhat al-Makkiyah, he says, Allah did not ask Ibrahim to sacrifice Ismail except to show the creation that love for Allah must come before love for one's child. And that the true sacrifice, the severing of the heart's attachment to anything other than Allah, not the sacrifice of the body itself. And he understood, actually Ibn Arabi understood another verse from the Quran when Allah says, it is neither their meat or nor their blood that reaches Allah, but it is your pity that reaches him. Thus he has subjected them to you so that you may glorify Allah for guiding you and give good news to those who do good. And Rumi, the most famous poeter, Sufi poeter, he says, and he was in the 13th century, and he says in his also famous book, Methnawi, said, indeed, Ibrahim did not seek to slaughter his son, but rather to slaughter his love for Ismail, so that nothing would remain worshipped in his heart except Allah. And Al-Qushayri, Imam Al-Qushayri, in the 11th century, in his most sacred or most also famous in the Sufi world and Muslim world book, he said, the letter of Al-Qushayri, he said, the true believers is the one who sacrifices what is dearest to him, even dearer than his own self. If his child is dearest to him, then he must offer him for the sake of Allah. And if it is his wealth or his desires, then he must slaughter those instead. And Al-Junayd al-Baghdadi, at the 10th century, actually the 9th century, he says, Sufism is not about food, drink, or clothing. It is the slaughter of the ego with the knife of spiritual striving. Al-Hasan al-Basri at the 8th century says, slaughtering one's desires is more beloved to Allah than slaughtering a ram. And finally, Al-Tustari at the 9th century, he said, Eid, the celebration day Eid, is the day when the grace of Allah returns to you, not the day when a ram merely passes beneath the blade. Thank you very much, and thank you for your patience. I would like to give the mic to my dear brother, Ted, and I hope you understand me well, and it was good. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Brother Ovid, for sharing such a wealth of understanding of the meanings of these sacred stories and our shared texts, and especially the meaning of sacrifice, how it applies to ourselves. It's interesting to compare the style of the Quran and the Torah and the stories that we find there. And as I understand it, many times the stories are put forward in the books of Moses and the Torah without much commentary. It doesn't say that the actions of the people were good or bad or honorable or correct. It just sort of tells us what happened. And then the interpretation is largely left up to the reader to see what lessons, spiritual lessons, we can draw from the text. And of course, there are commentators down through the years in the Talmud and other Jewish commentaries in the Zohar, the mystical commentary of Kabbalah, that sheds light on these things, and we're going to discuss that a little bit tonight. But I like to start with the story itself, as it overlaps the story in the Quran. And you'll see many details that are found in the Torah that are not in the Quran, and vice versa. And these things don't necessarily contradict. Many times they can complement each other, just filling in details that are absent in one and the other. But in the Torah stories, we find many cases of rivalries in family, sibling rivalries, and difficulties within families. So this was the case with Abraham and his two wives. He had two wives named Hagar and Sarah. Sarah was actually his first wife, who had a maidservant named Hagar, according to the biblical text, and she might be considered a concubine or secondary wife in the Torah context. And Sarah was of old age, and she wasn't having any children. And so the couple became more and more anxious to have a child and an heir. And so then Sarah says to Abraham, "Take my maidservant for your wife and have a child with her." And so through this, the maidservant, through Hagar, Ishmael was born. So he was the firstborn. And a rivalry continued between the wives, or started between the wives at that point in time, because the one was barren and the other was considered a disgrace in the culture, and the other one had an heir that was produced. And so there was tension between them. Then eventually, in her old age, the Torah says 99 years old, can you imagine, Sarah became pregnant. And when she heard that she was going to have a son at that age, she laughed. And the name Yitzhak actually means laughter, because the mother laughed at the idea that she would have a son at that age. So the boys were very, spread in age quite a bit. And Ishmael was a teenager when Isaac was weaned. And the story in the Torah is that they were bullying each other, especially the older one was bullying the younger one. And the mother, Sarah, went to the defense of her son and said, "This woman and her son need to go, because this son is not going to be an heir with my son, with Isaac." Abraham was known for being soft-hearted. He was a man of chesed. He was a man of loving kindness. He did not want to send Ishmael away. He resisted this, but finally his wife, kept after him, and he got a vision from God that he should listen to his wife. So Hagar and the baby and the young teenage boy were sent off into the wilderness, and this picks up the story that Abed was telling about the sufferings of Hagar and her thirst and wandering in the wilderness, lost, and having to trust totally in God at that time. So then it's at this point in time that this story of the sacrifice comes up, and God appears to Abraham and says to sacrifice your son, your beloved one, on as the sacrifice to me. And again, the story is pretty much without commentary. I don't know, Chris, if you have the text that you can share, and we can read along, and maybe others can follow the story a little bit better by being able to read it. So one of the things I'd like you to notice as we go through the Torah version of the story is the emotional nature of it, the poignancy of the narrative, and the feelings of Abraham as he is undergoing this test. So in Genesis 22, summarizing some verses are skipped here, but this will give you the basic story. And it came to pass after these things that Elohim, that is God, tested Abraham. And he said to him, Abraham, take your son, your favored one, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him up as an offering. Most translations say your only son here rather than your favored one, and this is a point that can come up in some discussions. But then Abraham said to his servants, as he was going with Isaac to the mountain to sacrifice him, you stay here with the ass, and I and the boy will go up there, and we will worship, and we will return to you. So it's interesting that even though the idea was to sacrifice Isaac, he said that we're going to come back. So maybe there's a little gleam or foretaste here in the Torah that Isaac was going to live through this incident. So then, as they were walking along, Isaac said to his father Abraham, Father, and he answered him, Yes, my son. And he said, Here is the fire and the wood, but where is the sheep for the offering? Well, the reader knows that Isaac is the intended offering here. So you can see the pathos and the emotion that this would naturally bring up. But God said, Abraham said, it is God who will see to the sheep. And he uses the word yireh, which comes up, Hebrew word, which comes up later in the story, for this burnt offering. So God would see to it, and the two of them walked on together. Then they arrived to the place which God had told him, and Abraham built an altar there, and he laid out the wood, and he bound his son Isaac. And remember, Isaac is an adult, probably 30 years old at this time, and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. And Abraham picked up the knife to slay his son. And then the messenger of Adonai called out to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham, do not raise your hand against the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you have feared God, for you have not withheld your son, your only one, from me. And when Abraham looked up, his eye fell upon a ram caught in the thicket by its thorns. And so Abraham took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering in place of his son. And Abraham named that site Adonai Yireh, meaning God will see to it. So you can see a lot of parallels here between the story in the Quran. It's interesting here that initially Isaac didn't know that he was the intended sacrifice, and the Quran says that Isaac did know. But we can piece these things together because at some point before Isaac was tied up and laid on the altar, Abraham had to tell him that this was God's command. And Isaac, being a young and vigorous man, could have resisted that, but he must have been compliant with that, as exactly what the Quran says. And so he offered himself at that point. So it's really interesting to see the parallels and the way these stories work together to teach these same spiritual truths. There's a principle to reading these stories that I think is really central. It's quoted from the book of Isaiah, and it says, when there are judgments from you, meaning from God, in the earth, righteousness is what the inhabitants of the land will certainly learn. So these things are all intended to teach lessons. And we're not necessarily told what those lessons are, but we can use our reasoning power and read some commentaries and get a view. I'd like to share with you one thought of a rabbi who commented on the section, an Orthodox rabbi, who said the following, and this may be startling at first, but think about it a little bit. He says, Isaac's death was never a possibility, not as far as God was concerned. God would use this opportunity to teach humankind once and for all that human sacrifice, child sacrifice, is not acceptable. This is precisely how the sages of the Talmud understood the binding of Isaac. Citing the prophet Jeremiah's exhortation against child sacrifice, they state unequivocally that such behavior never crossed God's mind. That was to allow Isaac to be sacrificed, referring specifically to the slaughter of Isaac. Though readers of this parsha, or this section of the Torah throughout the generations, have often been disturbed, even horrified by it, there is no intent on God's part in actually killing Isaac. So it's really interesting to think about the practices in the ancient Near East where child sacrifice was part of the culture. And Abraham, of course, was raised in that culture. And the Canaanites especially were known for sacrificing their children, often the infant children, but aged children as well, to Baal or to Molech. And it's written in Isaiah specifically that the Valley of Hinnom, which is a valley just outside the walls of Jerusalem, had been used for sacrificing to Baal. And it was something that God had never commanded, says Jeremiah, nor had it entered his mind. But this was a custom of the times, mentioned several times throughout the Hebrew Bible. Archaeologists have substantiated this practice. They discovered in Phoenicians, which is in the north of Israel, Lebanon today, and the Phoenicians were seafaring, and they also had colonies throughout the Mediterranean. And so it's found in Carthage, which is on the north coast of Africa, in Sicily, and other areas around the Mediterranean. The practice of child sacrifice has been documented in cemeteries where they have found bones of children with inscriptions offering the child in sacrifice as a consecration for themselves, to have redemptive value, and to get a blessing, that the people say that God had heard their voice and blessed me because of the sacrifice. So this custom then was outlawed very early in the biblical period, and it was never acceptable among the Abraham or any of his descendants to engage in the sacrifice. But then the question comes up, why did God test Abraham in this way? And going to the Zohar, which is the mystical interpretation, it goes through a line of reasoning that I think you'll enjoy. If Akbar could share the screen again, and we'll go to this rather lengthy quote from the Zohar. Here we must reflect. Elohim, that is God, tested Abraham. But the verse should read, tested Isaac. For Isaac was already 37 years old, and his father was no longer responsible for him. If Isaac had said, I refuse, his father would not have been punished, would not have been considered disobedience, according to this interpretation. Why then is it written that Elohim tested Abraham and not Isaac? No, the commentary says it had to be Abraham. He had to be crowned with gevurah, that is strictness in judgment. For until now, Abraham had no rigor, or the ability to balance loving kindness and judgment, compassion and judgment. Now water is crowned with fire, getting a little mystical here, using the symbolism for chesed and gevurah. We lost our text. Was that intentional? Okay. Maybe Akbar disappeared. Okay. So the text compares chesed to flow, that is loving kindness, to something that moves easily like water, and judgment to like fire, a purging effect. And it says in this case, after Abraham was tested, he was not complete until what he now had invested with the power to execute judgment. And so it was ordained in his dominion, and so all his life he had been displaying too much loving kindness and needed to be firmed up a little bit in his priorities, in his devotion to the cause of justice and judgment. So that is why Elohim tested Abraham, not Isaac. He summoned Abraham to be crowned with gevurah, with judgment, and when he had done so, fire entered water, each completing the other. One was judged, and the other executed judgment, each crowned the other. So that's why it concludes, Abraham was tested, for until he had executed judgment by binding Isaac, he could not have attained perfection. So that kindness, the love and the tenderness that we saw in the account of the two going up the mountain, and where is the sacrifice going to come from, and imagine Abraham's feelings at that time, that was the tenderness and the hesed at that point. But his ability to follow God's command, even not knowing the result, gave him a firmness. And then God in his kindness made a way out of this bind. He stopped Abraham from sacrificing it, and of course, it was never part of the Abrahamic tradition at any point moving forward after that. So the idea is that there are spiritual lessons, as Abid was so well pointing out, in these sacred stories. I'd like to turn attention a little bit to Christian interpretations, and I'm not an expert here, but there is a style of interpretation very much prevalent both in the New Testament and in the commentaries of the early Christians, that's called typology. That is, where characters and stories are given symbolic meaning, and they're portraying something else in the future that applies to the Christian era. So, for example, Moses leading the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt is seen as a type or a foreshadowing of Jesus leading his people out of slavery to sin. Or when Jonah was said to be in the belly of the fish for 3 days, it is seen as a type of Jesus' burial and resurrection on the 3rd day. So in this same way of seeing symbolic parallels in these Torah stories, the story of Abraham sacrificing or intending to sacrifice Isaac is seen as a type of God sacrificing his only son, Jesus. And the fact that Isaac lived through it is seen to represent the resurrection, that Christ really couldn't be killed, but that his life went on and survived the incident. So this is interpreted to be a prophecy in a sense. That is, Abraham sacrificing Ishmael or Isaac is seen as a prophecy of Christ in the crucifixion. And we have a father with us who probably could add a lot of Christian perspective, and we'd love to hear that. But I'd like to conclude with some quick thoughts from the Baha'i writings. The Baha'i faith is a New World religion that embraces all of the traditions we've been talking about tonight. It embraces Moses, Christ, Muhammad as genuine prophets of God, bringing genuine revelation, but it also embraces the prophets of the East, like Krishna and the Buddha, and Aboriginal and Native American and Native African spiritual voices and so forth, all as having been part of the plan for divine revelation. And in each of these traditions, sacrifice is important. What does sacrifice mean? Abdu'l-Baha, who was the son of the founding prophet Baha'u'llah, said, "The moth is a sacrifice to the candle." Moths are drawn to light, and they'll even sacrifice themselves or kill themselves by this attraction. The spring is a sacrifice to the thirsty one by giving some of its water. The sincere lover is a sacrifice to the loved one, and the longing one is a sacrifice to the beloved. The point here is this: One must wholly forget himself and seek the good pleasure of the one true God. When the souls are released from the fetters of this world, they are the ransomed ones, or the martyrs, or the Son of Truth, who has hastened to the altar of heart and soul. I think this is just what Abed was saying, was the meaning and significance of sacrifice. So when we put doing good for others ahead of our own interests, this is a sacrifice. We become as a living sacrifice. And so this exists in all these sacred traditions. But there usually is a hero or a king of sacrifice in each age, which becomes an exemplar for this. So in the dispensation of the Torah, it was the sacrifice of Isaac, Ishmael. In the Christian dispensation, it was the sacrifice of Christ on the cross. In the Shia Islamic tradition, Baha'i writings point to Imam Hussein, who was sacrificed on the battlefield in defense of Islam. And in the Baha'i faith, Baha'u'llah's son had an accident. He fell through a skylight in the prison in the Holy Land where he was, and he lingered for several days. And he's given as an example of a wonderful spirit of graciousness. He wasn't bitter about what happened to him. He greeted guests at his bedside with grace, and he became an example of accepting what had happened with patience. Again, trusting in God, that God would see to it, that there is a next world, that there is a future beyond what is visible. And so he was sacrificed in that way. In the hidden words of Baha'u'llah, it says, "I have made death as a messenger of joy to thee. Wherefore dost thou grieve?" So, and out of faith, we see the unfoldment of God's purpose being a joyful blessing to everybody. It helps us to accept the various trials that life throws at us and the hardships that we have to deal with. So I want to thank all of you for your kind attention. I hope you've written some interesting questions for us in the chat. And I think I'd like to open it up. Abed, do you want to moderate the discussion, please? Call on people and as we take some questions now.
Sure. Yeah, first of all, we would love to hear from you and to answer any question you would like to address. But first of all, I just want to remain that there is a great wisdom from what Allah, from the style itself, from the style between the Islam and the Judaism and the Christianity, and what Allah was mentioned here and wasn't mentioned there. And we talked before about this actually specific wisdom, dear Ted, that one of the lessons that we can learn, that why Allah in the Torah or the Bible, he didn't mention the different things that he mentioned in the Quran, and the opposite way as well. Because in the Quran we can find the stories here and there, but to take the wisdom or the lessons from it, and he didn't mention names, but in the Torah and the Bible, he mentioned names and or specific dates or some and different things, but and the opposite way. So, and one of these wisdoms that when Allah says in the Quran, وَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ, and ask the people of book if you don't know, because he wanted to tell us you are not just a new religion came up and no, you following, you continuing. So you need each other. You need each other. As we always remain that Allah, when he said, إِنَّا خَلَقْنَاكُم مِّن ذَكَرٍ وَأُنثَىٰ, we made you from male and female and nations and tribes to meet each other, to know each other, to learn from each other. So we need each other to learn from each other. So there is some of details here and some of details there. And also we have to remember there is 2,000 years between the Prophet Muhammad and Moses. And at that time, that religion was sent to specific nations, the Banu Israel, or the sons of Israel, and for one nation and for specific things. And the population wasn't that large compared to the time of the Prophet Muhammad. So there you want to deal with the people in this way, in this style, and here you need to add some things and to do some things, but the beautiful things that we need to learn from each other. Yes, we disagree on some details, of course, and this is for the comparative only discussions, and the comparative discussions only to learn the lessons from this discussions and what is the wisdom from there. So of course, for the same story, we can have different perspectives and different ways. And at the same time, you can learn from the same thing, different things. And each one of us, we have stand in different positions, so we can see different points. So you are welcome. If you want to add any question, if you have any comment, you are so welcome. Please. I'm happy to hear that you understand fully and you feel the message. But yeah, if anybody would like to add anything, he's more than welcome.
While people are thinking, please feel free to ask. I wanted to share a thought. I prepared a lot of material. I didn't have time to go through it all. But forgive me for quoting from your book, dear Abid, but there's a beautiful verse in the Quran that applies to understanding our differences and engaging with them in a peaceful way, in a way that binds us together rather than draws separation. The Quran says, to every people, we have appointed rites and ceremonies that you must follow. Let them not dispute with thee, that is, the Muslims, on these matters, but do invite them to your Lord, for you are assuredly on the right way. But if they do wrangle with thee, say, Allah knows best. Allah will judge between you on the day of judgment concerning the matters in which ye differ. So it doesn't say to have these verbal arguments, to wrangle, to struggle and fight. Oh, I have a better story. I have the true story. And we can have perspectives, and we can think about them, and they might be a little different, but they shouldn't be the focus of our attention. They shouldn't draw animosity between us. And the wonderful thing about the story of Isaac and Ishmael, even though they had problems as kids and between them, when it came to the death of their father, according to the Torah, they were both there together.
Right.
And this is in Hebron, and we have visited there the tomb of the patriarchs together. And so the end of the story is a reconciliation.
Yes, and there in the Torah they mentioned v'horidu ito lekever shnei banav Yishmael v'Yitzhak, and then they put him down on the grave, his two sons Ishmael and Yitzhak. Yes.
I think Ali has his hand up. Can you unmute yourself and ask a question, please? Where is he also? There he is. Beautiful.
Well, good evening. I just want to compliment the accounts that were heard tonight, and glad to be here first time. I met Ted about a little over a year ago, and I met Abid about a little over 6 months ago. So this is wonderful, and appreciate to hear these stories at my age now versus the stories we hear when you're a child about this particular history. So thank you so much for such a great sharing.
By the way, Ali is from Egypt, and he and Abid speak Arabic together, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Salam alaikum. Shalom.
Salam. Shalom. Shalom.
Great to be here, and wonderful to hear both of you and all the participants that are here tonight. This is a wonderful gathering.
It is, and it's a pleasure to be with you, dear brother. It was. I remember that was a very beautiful meeting at Ted House, and
Sure.
with the beautiful music.
Yes.
Yeah, it was great.
You playing the guitar, yeah.
Right. The oud.
These are in Arabic called the barakat.
Yeah. The blessings. Right.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, dear brother. Thank you so much, dear brother.
Our friend Jack has his hand up as well.
Please, dear Jack.
Yeah, again, I want to reiterate what Ali just said. You guys really presented great presentations, and it's nice to be with a bunch of people that are spiritually minded without an agenda, more about learning what other people's viewpoints are and understandings.
Right.
And I come at it from a student. I've looked at all the religions you've talked about and are, but I've never been an in-depth student of Islam. Interestingly enough, though, the guy that's doing all my PR work's from Pakistan, so he's Islamic, and I get his viewpoints all the time, and I'm loving that. But my question from the Urantia book talks a lot about Abraham and his paying tithes to Melchizedek. And Melchizedek only comes up a few times in the Bible, in the Old Testament and the New Testament, as being without beginning of days or end of nights, a high priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. And it tells us that Melchizedek sent emissaries throughout the world at that time, funded by Abraham. And in this, I want to point out that whatever religion I've ever studied, the influence of the people at the time, whether it was Baha'i, Abraham, great teachers coming up now, the sects, all these different religions, I think are governed by our free will and spiritual entities trying to work with us and not giving us everything. So it's made me really curious in listening to your talk, why, Abraham and Islam aren't talked about more in the Urantia book. But there's a lot of other things, the pyramids and millions of other things that aren't. I find it the most viewpoint enhancing body of material on the planet, but by no means does it cover everything. So it's really sparked a desire for me to know more about Melchizedek and Islam and see what's there. So what can you tell me about Melchizedek is the question.
Yeah.
One of the things that's interesting about Melchizedek is that he offered bread and wine to Abraham, and that has, of course, been a big part of Christian and Judaism. For Shabbat, there's a prayer, the Motzi, over the bread, and Kiddush over the wine, and communion, of course, uses the same sacraments. And so there's a thread in the tradition. It says Melchizedek was a king and a priest. The name Melech Tzedek means king of righteousness, and he was king of Salem, so he was a king of peace as well. Let's see, Stephen has a hand up.
Did you see my comment?
You could repeat it for the group.
Well, there are a couple of Bible stories that are like fairy tales. One of them is the story of Abraham and Isaac, or Ishmael. The story of Abraham about to slaughter Ishmael or Isaac is like in Snow White, the fairy tale where the huntsman was about to slaughter Snow White, but slaughtered a small animal instead.
Well, as you know, there are many ways to read the Torah. Some take it as literal history and are fundamentalists, and others take it as spiritual lessons and non-historical. From the secular point of view, my education, they would look for confirming documentation in other cultures of different historical events that happened, and if it only is found in one, religious source, it's not necessarily accepted as historical in a secular environment. So we're all, you know, we all have multiple views of the historicity of these stories. It's interesting in the Baha'i faith, the point is made that Baha'is believe everything that is written, but don't take it all literally. So many of the stories are allegories or have symbolic meanings. You know, death can be separation from God, a death of one's soul in this life while still alive, and so things you know, have symbolic meanings, and don't necessarily are things like the conquest of the land by Joshua and things like that. Those stories aren't necessarily historical, and the archaeological evidence doesn't really bear them out either. So that's a Baha'i perspective, and other people, of course, have a variety of other perspectives as well.
Yeah, exactly. I just want to also add one comment about why some of the why the books doesn't cover everything, because of course Allah in the Quran, he mentioned وما فرطنا في هذا الكتاب من شيء. We talked about everything, but what is everything mean? Everything that we need, everything as a human being. The religion, it's a lifestyle. Life, it's style who organize our life together, and between our relationship between us and Allah and God, and between us as a human being, and how we can coexist and cooperate and live together without harming each other. So the religion book and always the Islamic scholars try to explain that the Quran isn't a storyteller. It's not a book of stories. But yeah, we have lots of stories in the Quran, of course, to learn the lessons and the wisdom there. But it wasn't about the stories itself. It is about what you learn from the story, what the lessons that you learn from story. And actually, the beautiful thing that this 3 books, especially, you will find millions of books that wrote about every word inside these books. So that means that the human beings mostly, they following and trying to understand and have different perspectives, and all these perspectives came only from these books. So I mean the millions books, but and yeah, this is the beautiful thing. And also we have to understand that again, these books will cover periods or times that Allah will mention for you some of these stories only to take the lessons from them. But to continue your life, you have to obey Allah and to follow His commands and orders, to what you can do, how to deal together, how to talk together, how to live together.
In the chat, David Hall posted a question about peace in the Holy Land, current issue with Gaza and the Israelis. And I'll read it in his words, and I know this is a question dear to your heart. Probably nobody I know who's better skilled to answer this question. Okay? He says, what does the Abrahamic reunion wish to do with regards to Gaza under war and famine? Thousands of years of fighting, and what has changed? Now what are our possibilities for the refugees, humanitarian aid, and the Israelis?
So this is a beautiful question, but I need also to address and to tell you, for example, today we had Sheikh Hassan in the Holy Land had a huge meeting, a very big meeting with different leaders from the society, especially the Arab society and the Israeli society. So we as peacemakers, and we have a non-profit organizations who are working and doing everything they can to bring peace. We don't have that major powerful like governments to stop or making stop wars or making wars, to create peace and a mandatory peace, or just or just negotiation as we do. So we understood that what we can do, and what we can do is to build the people heart. It's to build understanding between the people and inside the society. So inside the society, we creating lots of programs for understanding programs, bringing the people together. And I witness for all my life. I'm third generation in my family, so I am witness for all my life. I was being involved in a dialogue and peacemaking and the programs and a lot. And I witnessed for the few people in the past 45 years ago or 50 years ago, my grandfather and Rabbi Fruman and a few people started, and today they are thousands of people. Unfortunately, after the war, after the pain, the people now become more understandable for the situation, and they valuable now what is a quiet and peaceful life mean. How can I be have a good lifestyle, have a good amount of money, have a quiet, even without money. Now they don't ask about money, they ask about safety, about to be quiet, not a bombing every day. I mean, in both sides. Of course, in Gaza, they have unbelievable now a huge number of people that die from the bombing, and at the same time in Israel also they have. We care about each person, each human being life. So we create lots of programs to bring the people together with a very beautiful curriculums. And we have now we're working on a youth programs. For example, our dear friend once said the United States government developed a program and spent over 80 millions to this program to train soldiers to become well-trained soldiers. But the Abrahamic Reunion now, training 20 youth. Now in August we will have a program for a youth, future leaders and peacemakers youth, training them on dialogue, facilitating dialogues, and creative programs and trauma healing. And these people, we prepare soldiers for just $2,500. And we asking the people, the support from people, because all of our budgets, it's donations from people who we asking them to we offering you. We have a huge team of a big team of professional people who can bring understanding, can bring people together to talk. And also we have a huge network and people that we know from all sides, from all levels, universities, and even from the governments and parliament people, that we trying to put more influence to stop wars, first of all, and to bring peace and understanding. And we're doing that, and we have successfully lots of women's programs, because the woman, it's the core of the house, the family, and can bring more families and husbands and sons, will education for them to educate their sons and to educate their families. And we succeeded, and we have numbers of people, thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people now in the Holy Land and across of the world that have more knowledge and awareness between them, and trying. Even if we couldn't influence the government, but we can influence the people. We can add more and more people to keep out and away from fighting each other. And this is what we can do. And this is what we try. We holding the hope. As the Prophet Muhammad says, if the day of judgment came upon you and you holding in your hand and a planet, put it in the ground. Put it, just plant it. Never stop hoping. Never stop working. Always go, even if the world is fighting, just go with love and hold this, all believe inside you and faith, and we will succeed, and peace is possible, and we will achieve peace, inshallah.
Thank you
We're working
so much for that impassion, and the work that you do in the Holy Land with the youth and other groups is wonderful, and I've been happy for the last 8 or 9 years to be able to collaborate with you a little bit. But I just wanted to mention that if you think about this theme of sacrifice, to get to peace is going to require sacrifice on everybody's part. One of it's to sacrifice ego.
Right.
People who are thinking that I have the stronger army, I have the more endurance, I can outlast you, I'm going to win if I keep on, fighting the war. I'm going to, on the other side, I can win. These thoughts have to be sacrificed, We have to put more value on peace than the idea that our side is going to win somehow. And this just leads to more and more and more wounding, hatred, trauma, and ultimately more violence. And then, the dreams of each people may be to have total possession of the land and get rid of the other side. Like what are they going to do on the Temple Mount with Al-Aqsa and rebuilding the temple? These dreams can't live side by side. Somebody's going to have to give up, or there's going to be more deaths and more slaughter. And the issues like that can proliferate. Forgetting and forgiving the death of a father, of a brother, the kidnapping, the torture, or whatever has happened. Think about the healing that has to happen. It's going to take a change of mind, a change of heart, the spring being willing to give water and allow the other to drink. So what we're talking about tonight with the spirit of sacrifice is really essential to peacemaking. My 2 cents, for what it's worth.
Again, dear Ted, I couldn't hear you last time. So just one comment. I can see that also everyone fighting because he's believed that he is the only right, and this is the problem, and this is actually the real problem. Is this what Allah wants? Because if he decided to support somebody, of course he will. But is this what Allah wants exactly from us all to learn and to how to live together? And of course, yes, we have to respect each other and to give for both sides, and not only in Palestine and Israel and everywhere, to just give the people chance to live in quiet and side by side, and to build the bridges and instead the walls, as the Pope says, as we talk in the Lake Worth Conference.
Beautiful. Well, this has been really nice. We didn't have any idea how many people would show up. We had 39 people, I think, at our peak, 36 people still here. And we hope to do this regularly, approximately once a month. And we'll announce our events through the same way that you learned before, through the Abrahamic Reunion, through Rising Tide, through Lake Worth Interfaith Network, and through TAO, Temple of Thor. So this has been real treat, learning experience. The research that I did, I learned a lot. I learned a lot from listening to Abid and the explanation of all of the events that go around the Hajj and how it relates to Hagar and Ishmael, and its beautiful history that enhances a love of God and a love of righteousness. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you too, dear
regard, and for Akbar, Chris Miller, for all these American Sufis have 2 names. It took me a long time to figure it out. But Chris, thank you for doing the technology for us tonight too.
Thank you too, dear Ted, and we learned from you a lot. Thank you very much. Thank you all of you to be with us today. Inshallah, the next month we will have another meeting.
Can everybody unmute and say 3 times, love, love, love.
Love,
Love, love. All
love.
you need is love.
All 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 you need is
All we need is love.
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 Love you all.
Love you.
Love you
Thank you.
all.
It went
Good night.
from all of us.
Yay.
From
Thank
all
you
of
all.
us
Thank
up
you
at
all. And Amanda, thank you. And everybody, thank you. Thank
Thank
you.